His Excellency Mr. Yakunin, distinguished panelists, cherished friends, peace be with you. I'd like to begin by thanking the World Public Forum for this very kind invitation. Violence in the name of religion is as ancient as human civilization itself. Very often, this violence involves followers of different religions. Sometimes it involves people within the same faith. The Sunni-Shia conflict that we're witnessing today is a testimony to violence within a particular faith. It is violence which has claimed thousands of lives in the last few years alone. Many of us here are aware that this violence is linked to a schism which has been with the Muslim world for more than 1,000 years. It is a schism which initially began with a dispute over the question of who should assume the mantle of leadership of the nascent Muslim community in the early 7th century after the passing away of the Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him. Over the centuries, it has evolved into a conflict that centers around rituals, practices, and doctrinal issues. It has become a conflict which is intertwined with politics and power and personalities. We shall be exploring this in our session later this afternoon when we examine Sunni-Shia relations in greater depth. Suffice to say at this stage that while doctrinal differences and differences in practices are important in explaining the conflict itself and the violence that accompanies the conflict is not really linked to doctrine or practice. It is the interpretation of doctrine and practice. It is the attempts by religious elites in many instances to exploit differences, to preach hatred, to demonize the other, to stigmatize the other. It is this that leads to violence. And sometimes this violence is related to political ends because it serves their political masters. It serves major political actors. Friends, if you look at intra-religious conflicts, more than perhaps inter-religious conflicts, you'll find that it is politics and power which actually dominates these conflicts, more than the doctrinal concerns. Look at the Sunni-Shia conflict to understand this in greater depth. While there have been differences, murders, perhaps even violence in different periods of Muslim history, as far as the contemporary period goes, the hate, the venom, the attempts to demonize and to stigmatize have become more pronounced after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. It is the Iranian Revolution of 1979, the reaction to that revolution, attempts to prevent the impact of that revolution from being felt in other countries. It was this that has led to the present uneasiness, tension, hatred between Sunnis and Shias. This is something that we have to understand, that it is politics and its power. And this has gone on for decades. And one can argue that with the Syrian conflict dominating Muslims everywhere, the Syrian conflict has become yet another stage in the aggravation of Sunni-Shia relations. Again, you will see a consistent attempt to demonize, to stigmatize particular communities, most of the time one side against the other, but sometimes the weaker, the vulnerable, also in reaction to the dominant forces, they too attempt to stigmatize and demonize. And very often you find that this leads to violence. When you look at conflicts involving different religions, you will find that there is the same pattern. The same pattern of stigmatizing, creating hatred. The role of religious elites is very significant, even in conflicts between different religious communities. And in the end, you have violence. Let's look at one domestic conflict very quickly to understand this. What is happening in Myanmar today? In Myanmar, you have religious elites from the dominant community targeting a minority for political reasons, which are cleverly camouflaged. But the underlying motive for this targeting of the minority is power, in order to perpetuate the power of a dominant military elite. If you look at it from a global perspective, again, you will see that politics and power plays a very big role. At the global level, you will find that there are elements within the Christian right who have endorsed war and violence, who have endorsed war and violence in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in order to perpetuate the political agenda of certain very powerful forces. This is the link between segments of the Christian right and the dominant political elites of the day, the global powers that be. It's not just at the level of supporting some other forces which embark upon military adventures. It happens in yet another way, and that's becoming increasingly evident. You have these dominant elements supporting militants, arming them, funding them, providing them with logistical support and intelligence hardware in order to achieve their aims. We saw that happening for the first time in the current period in the attempts by jihadists, militants, backed by the powerful against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. This was the first example of the powerful supporting good terrorists in order to achieve their aim. And it has happened again in Libya, and it's happening in Syria, where you have the powerful supporting these elements in order to achieve their aim. Now that's as far as the dominant hegemonic forces are concerned. In reaction to them, you have Muslim groups who have chosen to embark upon violence as part of their agenda in order to achieve their dream of a global caliphate. They indulge in unbelievable violence because they see this as their mission. So you have the dominant forces manipulating groups and individuals that are committed to violence, and you have other elements opposed to them. Sometimes they're victims, but also indulging in violence, embarking upon violence. So that is the reality that confronts us, and religion is the victim. How do you overcome this situation, friends? This is a very complex and challenging scenario that confronts us. How do you overcome this situation? Number one, I think it is so important for us who do not subscribe to the misuse and abuse of religion along these lines. It is so important for us to expose what is happening, to tell the truth about what is happening, to show the links between the powerful political actors, religious elites, and the way in which violence is manipulated. Not many of us are prepared to do that. We must be prepared to do that at the global level, at the domestic level. That is our first task, to expose what is happening. Our second task related to that is to educate. To educate our own followers in particular about what our religion really is. In the context of the Sunni-Shia dispute, it is a shame that very few scholars, very few journalists, activists have told Muslims that there have been long periods of rapprochement between Sunnis and Shias, that there are very strong theological links between Sunnis and Shias, that this is the reality, that at various points in history, including the contemporary period, there have been both Sunnis and Shias who have attempted to build bridges. There are so many examples, too numerous to detail in an intervention of this sort. This is education, and this goes for all religious communities. We'd like to see Buddhists do it in relation to the militants within their own community, Hindus, Jews, Christians, Sikhs. In all these communities, you have militants. But this sort of public education is so vital and so crucial. It is not happening to the extent and to the degree that we would like to see. A third task before us is for people of different religious communities who have a totally different perspective on the challenges that confront society and religion to come together. To come together not just to exchange pleasantries, not just to preach in meaningless platitudes about how we can work together and all the rest of it, to translate it to something concrete. And this is happening, even though it is not being observed by various actors and it's not being noticed by a lot of people, but it is happening. In Myanmar, for instance, in the midst of this attempt to demonize a weak and vulnerable minority, which is less than 5% of the population of Myanmar, you find that there are Buddhists, including Buddhist monks and laypersons, working together with Muslims in the spirit of genuine interfaith work, standing up against the forces of power and influence in their society. A tremendous risk to their lives, but they're doing it. They're speaking up, they're writing, they're campaigning. These are voices on the margin at this point in time, but it is their work that would count in the long run. And at the international level, friends, against hegemony, against the misuse of religion by people who are prepared to resort to violence in order to achieve their aims, you have Christians and Muslims working together. It's happening in the Philippines. It is happening in certain other parts of the world. There'll be a very big meeting at the end of this month. Christians and Muslims in solidarity against empire and hegemony in Korea. So you have people coming together, taking positions which are not part of the mainstream, but nonetheless they believe in what they're doing and they're prepared to sacrifice. And I think the World Public Forum and fora of this sort should support endeavors of this kind. Because what they're doing in the ultimate analysis is this: by standing up against violence, against bigotry within their respective religions, and joining hands with people of other communities, what they're doing is redefining faith. They're redefining the real meaning of religion, what it is to be a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu, and what have you. I think that is something which is very, very important. They are in fact saying that the essence of their respective faiths, it's not this very exclusive, bigoted attitude. It is inclusiveness, it's universalism, it is this progressive attitude, sharing values, fighting together on a common platform. And by bringing out the essence of their faith, what they're also telling us, all these individuals from different religious backgrounds, they're telling us that what we would like to see is religion illuminating the soul of humankind. We don't want religion to be that force which devours the body of civilization. Thank you.